The first night Marcus heard those words, he thought they were a joke. Something people said casually without meaning it. But the way Noah looked at him, standing in the dim yellow light of their cramped apartment kitchen, made it feel heavier than that, like a promise with a cost neither of them fully understood. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of moments that quietly change lives forever, take a second right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this only matter if people like you keep them alive. It had been 3 months since Marcus moved to Chicago, chasing a job that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. The city was louder than he expected, colder than he imagined, and lonelier than he ever admitted. His days blurred into long hours at a warehouse, lifting boxes that weren't his, for people who didn't know his name. At night, he returned to an apartment that never quite felt like home, until Noah showed up. Noah had arrived with nothing but a duffel bag, a crooked smile, and a strange kind of calm that made Marcus uneasy at first. He was the kind of person who noticed things, the flicker of doubt in your eyes, the weight in your silence. He didn't talk much about his past, but there was something in the way he moved, like he had learned to carry pain without letting it spill. The first few weeks, they lived like strangers sharing space. Polite nods, short conversations, the occasional shared meal. But slowly, something shifted. It started with small things. Noah fixing the broken cabinet without being asked, Marcus leaving an extra cup of coffee on the counter in the morning. Little acts that felt insignificant, but began stitching something fragile between them. Still, Marcus kept his distance. He had learned the hard way that people didn't stay. Back in Ohio, his father had left when he was 12, promising to come back with a better life. He never did. Since then, Marcus built walls so high even he couldn't see over them. One evening after a long shift that left his back aching and his spirit heavier than usual, Marcus found Noah sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an old photograph. The room smelled faintly of burnt toast, and the silence felt different, thicker, like it carried something unsaid. That was when Noah spoke those words, almost casually, but with an intensity that lingered long after. He said that if Marcus ever asked for anything, he would give it, not as a joke, not as a favor, but as something real. Marcus laughed it off at first, brushing it aside like people do when something feels too honest. But that night, lying awake on his narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, those words kept echoing. If you ask, I'll give you anything. It didn't make sense. No one offered something like that without expecting something in return. Days passed, and life returned to its usual rhythm. But something had changed. Marcus started noticing Noah more, the way he lingered in the doorway as if making sure Marcus got home safe, the quiet way he listened when Marcus vented about work, the rare but genuine smiles that seemed to soften the edges of the room. Then everything began to fall apart. The warehouse announced layoffs without warning. Marcus was called into the office on a gray morning that felt like it had already decided his fate. By the afternoon, he was walking back home with a cardboard box in his hands and a hollow feeling in his chest. Just like that, the fragile stability he had built was gone. He didn't tell Noah at first. Pride has a way of convincing you that silence is strength. But the rent was due in 2 weeks, and the numbers didn't add up no matter how many times Marcus tried to rearrange them in his head. He started skipping meals, pretending he had already eaten. He avoided eye contact, hoping Noah wouldn't notice. But Noah always noticed. One night, as rain tapped softly against the window, Noah finally asked. Not directly, not accusingly, just a quiet question that carried more understanding than Marcus was ready to face. That was when the truth slipped out, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hide. Marcus expected disappointment, maybe even frustration. What he didn't expect was the way Noah leaned back, took a deep breath, and reminded him of the promise he had made. For a moment, Marcus felt something close to anger. It sounded too simple, too easy. Life didn't work like that. People didn't just fix your problems because you asked. But Noah didn't offer money. He didn't hand over solutions wrapped in certainty. Instead, he offered something Marcus hadn't realized he needed more. He offered time. The next morning, Noah woke up before sunrise and sat with Marcus at the kitchen table. They went through job listings together, one by one, sending applications into the void of the internet. When Marcus started to lose hope, Noah kept going. When rejection emails came in, Noah didn't pretend they didn't hurt. He just stayed. Days turned into a week. The tension in the apartment grew, but so did something else. a quiet resilience that Marcus hadn't felt in years. For the first time, he wasn't facing everything alone. But the real turning point came on a night Marcus would never forget. The electricity was about to be cut off. The final notice sat on the counter like a ticking clock, and Marcus felt that familiar panic creeping in, the kind that made his chest tight and his thoughts spiral. That was when he remembered the words, "If you ask, I'll give you anything." For a long time he stared at Noah, who was sitting across the room, reading like nothing was wrong. Marcus's throat felt dry, his pride louder than his desperation. Asking felt like admitting defeat. But something inside him shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was trust finally finding its way through years of doubt. He asked. Not for money, not for a miracle. He asked for help, real help. He asked Noah not to let him fall apart, and Noah didn't hesitate. That night, Noah sold the only thing he had of value, an old guitar that Marcus had seen him play only once, late at night when he thought no one was listening. It wasn't just an object, it was a piece of his past, something he had held onto for reasons he never explained. Marcus didn't find out until later. At the time, all he knew was that the lights stayed on and the silence in the apartment felt different, less heavy, more hopeful. When Marcus finally confronted him, asking why he would give up something so important, Noah just smiled in that quiet way of his. He didn't say much, but the answer was clear in his eyes. Because you asked. That was the moment everything changed. It wasn't about the guitar or the money, it was about the realization that someone had chosen him, not out of obligation, not out of convenience, but out of genuine care. Marcus started pushing harder. He applied to more jobs, showed up to interviews with a determination he didn't know he had, and eventually something clicked. A small logistics company offered him a position, not perfect, but enough to start again. The day he got the call, Marcus didn't celebrate alone. He walked back to the apartment with a smile he couldn't hide, and for the first time in months, the city didn't feel so overwhelming. Life didn't suddenly become easy. Bills still came, days were still long, and the future was still uncertain. But something fundamental had shifted inside Marcus. He wasn't alone anymore, and neither was Noah. Because in the process of accepting help, Marcus had learned something even harder, how to give it. He started noticing the things Noah never talked about, the quiet burdens he carried. He began to ask questions, to listen, to show up in the same way Noah had shown up for him. The promise had come full circle. Before the story ends, there's something I want to ask you. If you've ever had someone show up for you when you needed it most, or if you've been that person for someone else, drop a comment right now. Just one word, here, it means more than you think. Months later, on a warm summer evening, Marcus came home to find a familiar shape leaning against the wall, a guitar. Not the same one Noah had sold, but something new, something chosen. He didn't say anything at first, he just placed it there and waited. When Noah walked in and saw it, his expression changed in a way Marcus would never forget. It wasn't about the object, it was about what it represented. It was proof that promises, when given sincerely, don't disappear. They evolve, they grow, they come back in ways you don't expect. And for Marcus, it was a reminder that asking for help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the beginning of everything changing. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you care about, or if it made you believe, even a little,